Thank you for joining me this morning. And like I got to read more about the book, how it connects so much with the world that we live in today, in society and technology. And to jump right in, the first question that I have is, your book engages designers to stop seeing individuals as users and instead like real humans. Why is this distinction critical to our world and like how people interact with data and technology?
That's a very good question, and one that really speaks to my experience as a longtime design leader. So I have been in the design space for almost 25 years, as a design research leader, leading people where the terminology being used at that time was human factors, human-centered design. And so a lot of that really begged to pay attention to potential harms that might be um, the outcome of poor design decisions. And the one example I have cited many times is that of, air pilots. Back in the day, the whole field of human factors really was around how do we design a safe cockpit? Because when you're at 35,000 miles above the ground, decisions are critical. And so the practice of human-centered design and human factors bled over to technology. And so for a long time, the titles that people would hold in that general space was human factors and ergonomics, which really centered upon the idea that we were designing design systems for humans. Years later, in about, I want to say 2009, we began to see something change. We no longer really saw a lot of human-centered design titles. What we saw was user experience design. And what that tells us is that we have displaced the human for the user. The humanity has been extracted out of that interaction, human computer interaction, to user experience design. Why this is important now, what we're now seeing is a trend towards customer experience design. So if you have a long view of the field of design as I do, you continually see this erosion of human beings down to not only users but customers, where now we no longer have things like ethnographic studies that really looked at a human in their context. But now you have cases where they're using the human beings' collective data, right, to make decisions about the humans without using the human at the
As
center of
if
the
they're
process.
just like robots. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So our humanity has been extracted out of the whole process, and that is concerning.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And for the next question, you make a powerful argument that bias in emerging technologies today is connected to painful historical context and experiences of the past. Um, could you explain like kind of the structural link and why like designers and other people who create stuff need to be aware of this?
And I know we started talking about this last time. So this is a really multi-layered answer because it needs to be contextually situated in varying circumstances with examples to denote what I mean. So I'll talk about the whole case of redlining in America specifically, and the deep legacies that were tied to slavery and putting people in their place, keeping people on their side, right? And that is something that we're seeing now, has made it from an analog context into a digital context. And that is now being used as part of AI design system risk modeling for business practices. Let me give you one example. Redlining itself, it has its legacy in the US. It is not to say that it does not exist elsewhere, but it also has certain cosmetic names like postal codes, zip codes, right? When you say something like a zip code, you automatically know who lives there. 90210, we know who lives there, right? I don't know, I don't remember the American postal codes,
It would be
but
like
why did
10454, for
yes,
example. That's for the
yes,
Bronx.
yes,
Yeah.
right? Imagine you're going to a bank to apply for a loan where all of the decision-making systems are now powered by AI, which is the case, or you're applying for a job and that is on your resume. All of these things are now built into a risk model to understand these cosmetic descriptors of people that they don't want to say black, but they will say the postal code. These hold heavy significances. These are now part of large language models, whether they're mathematical computations or linguistic computations that draw a picture about people. This is actually my main area of scholarship, is how people are characterized using data bits about them, right? And so that in itself, when it is computed in AI systems that make decisions to give people either the up or the down, that is a harm that is actually ported from analog to digital spaces. And a lot of this is being controlled by white men, right, who really do not understand that you cannot have only one class of people informing software that is to serve all types of people. Another one example I will give you, just to be brief, is in the medical space. For example, how do we actually diagnose skin cancer now? That is done with the power of AI. But if all the training material is done on pale skin, how will that work on yellow skin or red skin or black skin, right? It goes back to that funny Silicon Valley episode, hot dog, not hot dog, right? And so computer only recognizes what computer has learned, right? We must never forget that the AI data is a box of words and letters and numbers. That's what it is. If it has never experienced us, how can it know how to diagnose us? The same for surveillance system. If you've never taught it the phenotypical differences of black features versus white features, it has in the past suggest that black people are gorillas, right? Because it doesn't know. And so when I said it needs to be contextually situated, that is what I mean. The legendary Dr. Noble, Algorithms of Oppression, another author who incidentally I've had the occasion to talk to, talks about the pain she went through completing her own dissertation and not understanding that, every time she typed into the Google search engine, why are black women so? The next word that was produced, so ugly, so aggressive. Why are they prostitutes? Right? And so it is a system that has learned that language, right? And so that is what we're up against.
Yes. I know you talk a lot about like top bias and like how this stuff is put into the algorithms. Could you tell me a little bit more about like, do you think from your stance, would you consider this like a form of systematic like oppression? Because these are being, taught into like the systems that we type and, AI is growing vastly. Like, how do you?
Yeah, I simply retort again what Dr. Noble has said. They are algorithms of oppression. Even the works of Ruha Benjamin, another peer in the field, it's the new Jim Code. It is the new Jim Code. And until we dismantle these systems are going to be used to control us, used to keep us in our place. And so these are the systems we need to burn and crash and rebuild them so that they actually usable by civilization to come.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lubin. I love that response. For my next question, you talk about the importance of moving beyond, criticism to focus on like solutions and how to solve it. What is the most common surface level mistake that organizations make when they're trying to fix biases or like fix algorithms like we just talked about? And like, what is the deeper change that they should prioritize instead?
Excellent question. So one of the things let's use the skin cancer diagnosis. We use AI systems as an example. So it has been known that one of the things they've done, because they were accused of just having pale skin as part of the training model, it has been known that they've taken the skin and augmented digitally to make the skin look darker, as opposed to using real black people and real yellow people and real red people. And when I say red, I'm just using the color skin tones, just as a shorthand.
Yeah,
For,
I understand.
right? Sorry if that offends anyone. But so they've done that. And so the work that folks like Timnit Gebru and Dr. Buliamweni have pioneered is that it needs to be more than that. You need to actually use the real skin tones. You cannot just color it brown and assume that when
Yes,
you do the analysis, it'll work, right? And
yes.
so gender shades was all about that. And I want to footnote this with one small point. Back in the day, perhaps in the day of, my parents, your parents, also myself too, because I was born in the 70s, the whole idea of something called the Shirley cards, when you went to like a photo studio, the guy would check the light and he'd bring a couple of cards up to your face and test it. They're called the Shirley cards because they were calibrated using the skin tone of a white woman named Shirley. And so that is why when you look at an old Jet
Wow.
cover magazine or an old Essence cover magazine, all the Black people look weird. You're like, why do they look so weird? Because
Yeah.
our skin tone was calibrated around that ideal of the Shirley cards. And so there is a photographer out in BC, Canada, who's actually come out with his own calibration tools for photographing Black skin. And he does amazing work. And so what we cannot forget is that there needs to be more than one digital story. One digital story has driven so much in our world, and we're all held to that standard that is not our standard.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
I also want to say I feel like that goes back to like people being viewed as users. Like when you say like the Black skin was calibrated, that's like dehumanizing them and just like, turning them into users.
Blackface.
Okay.
It's blackface. It's digital
Yes,
blackface.
blackface. Yes,
Yes, call it that.
digital blackface.
Yes.
My next question is the case of the algorithms that affected the teenage girls in Salta, Argentina, is an example like in your book, like you talk a lot about that.
Yes.
What is the single most urgent lesson that like a non-technical leader, like a school official, could take away from that event, or like an
Yes.
administrator?
Yes. I'll leave it at a very high level, but that particular case was using technology to predict behavior, right? We predict that based on these models we build at, these are the people most likely to get pregnant, right? We can never forget that AI is using data, past data. How dare you use AI to predict something where human variations can really re-impact that narrative in the future, right? And so you're using old data to predict how we're going to exist in I don't know, 5, 10 years without really understanding the other circumstances that can actually make the story null and void. And so that is a broad stroke criticism of AI in general, not necessarily in all spaces. So, for example, in the skin cancer diagnosis, this has been really the efficacy levels are very high, where we could say, okay, now if we've added different skin tones, we can, with a high degree of certainty, say that this dark skinned person has melanoma or this white skinned person has, and these are the mathematical computations behind it. However, when you are making predictions about young girls being pregnant, right? It also speaks to an underlying aspect of eugenics. Why is this your concern? Why don't you go to Texas and Arkansas to do that? Or Tennessee, right? In the backwoods of Tennessee or the Appalachian Mountains. What are you doing in these spaces? And they're also doing that in Africa as well, too. Like, why?
Yes,
What is your concern that you
the
need to,
intention is
yeah, you need to monitor the pregnancy of Black and brown, babies. So
yes. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Um, So the pace of technological change makes people feel like progress is like inevitable and they can't
Mm.
control it anymore, like the rise of AI. Like recently there's been like a release, Sora AI, that's like by the same person that made ChatGPT. And it's like people are having videos being made of them without their consent. Like, and it's not even funny anymore. Um, what message of like agency and power do you offer students who will be the first generation working like alongside these systems, like my generation?
Wow. Nafi, I'm so happy I'm speaking to you about this. Just last night, I had to summon my boys to where I was sitting to say, under no circumstances do you download Sora.
I told
Because,
my brother the same.
yes, yes, and they will do what they will do. But so there's a company called Clearview AI that actually illegally script the internet of pictures of everyone. And that is actually a big part of my scholarship. I don't know if I mentioned it in the book, perhaps not, because I had extended only one of the chapters of my dissertation for that book, but it talks to surveillance systems. And it is a clever way of capturing our faces so that we exist in digital spaces as avatars doing things. But the scary part is that fundamentally there needs to be um, there needs to be warning labels for these things, just like cigarettes, as far as I'm concerned, cigarettes, alcohol, and all of that. And this really comes with governmental stakeholders participating in a design process to say this shall not stand for our citizens. right? But the problem right now is that a lot of governmental stakeholders are in alliance with big tech. So who's policing these activities? So for your generation, there needs to be, as much as there is analog activism for certain things that might affect your everyday, there needs to be digital activism. And that's why I dub myself a design activist in many ways, because these are the kinds of things I push back on, right? These are dark patterns of design systems that continue to extract from us without our consent. And I don't know. And imagine some of these spaces might be used for other, nefarious purposes, other,
Yes,
situations without
that's
getting into it, right?
yes, yes. That's a
Warning
big
labels.
growing concern. Sorry to cut you off.
I said warning labels, warning labels.
Yes, yes. And I think it's like since the beginning of time, it's always been very hard to make a change when like the government or the people in power don't want to make the change. So I
Yes.
think definitely like for me as a student, like restricting myself from using AI for my assignments, I think that's like a way I can help. Okay, so next question is, if a designer or developer reads your book and feels overwhelmed by the task of building ethical technology, where should they start? What is the single most practical first step toward ensuring their next project is built with justice and equity in mind?
Yes. So I recently gave a talk at a symposium at the University of Waterloo on design pedagogies and why it is so critical that we have interdisciplinary studies for engineers as well too. And the university where I lecture and has a deep legacy in understanding that there needs to be an alliance with the humanities and the STEM programs. Engineers by nature, they want to solve problems. They don't want to read the history of why they're doing stuff. They just want to get it done. And so, somebody reading my book, I would say to start with the whys of things and the histories of why they're doing what they're doing. And so, there's been a huge disconnect in about 2009, I want to say, at least in my memory, when we went from humans to users. It was as if we've truncated history to say it doesn't exist anymore. We forgot all of the harms that existed in these analog spaces with real humans. Now we're just headed towards using their data. And so, anyone reading my book really needs to understand that there needs to be some degree of working towards not having us alienated from our work, right? Which is also foundational to a lot of Marx theory as well too. But we need to understand the histories. We need to understand the archaeologies of the decisions. For example, we need to understand the commoditized history of women's bodies, even far back as Sarah Batman. Um, you know, what's the name? Algorithm of oppression and all of that. We need to understand all of these stories before we go about like doing the aesthetical design work that needs to be done, or the engineering that needs to be understood, that in an analog space we've ported all of that um, oppression into digital spaces. So before you start designing, you need to really understand the history of the space in which you are, and not just mechanically doing what you're told as an engineer, right?
Thank you. Um, Next question is, your work focuses on the challenges of measuring fairness and equity. If we can't rely on traditional metrics like economic outcomes, especially now that they're being generated by AI, to
Mm.
prove a system is ethical, what is a necessary non-traditional metric that you recommend to like evaluate justice-centered technology?
Yes, I think we also touched on that briefly, but
Yeah.
right, everyday human impact. The data can tell you whatever you want the data to tell you. But if you, I had a boss many years ago who used to say, Fox, Nahito. And we're like, what is he talking about? And he would tell us nothing interesting happens in the office. And so, yes, one of the best bosses I ever had. I don't think he'll ever have this, but his name is Chris Vino. And he really was one of these bosses who would insist that, you pack your bags and you go sit with the customer, understand the customer's pain, understands the impact. And so the one story I want to share is that I worked at Autodesk, where I was leading the design team for a piece of software called Amai. It's a 3D animation piece of software. And we would not have known, had we not gone to people's offices, that the guys doing the rendering of the whatever movie or cartoon or whatever, would actually start his rendering, go have lunch, and come back, right? And we're like, why are you doing that? You don't have to do that. It's like, well, your software is so slow. We wouldn't have known these things until we were there with him to see that he's gone, he's had a couple of drinks, he's come back. Sometimes the rendering stopped mid-rendering, and this could be a 2-day process. So we're able to know things like when we're designing stuff, we need to be able to enable them to compress certain files, right? And all of these things. And so looking at, we also must be cognizant of the metrics of our current ideological existence. And economics has always been the metrics of capitalistic systems, right? The money, the efficiency, and everything. The answer is that we need to connect with the human beings who are impacted by the changes to understand, for example, when we move from analog money to digital money, we're alienating the poor, right? Not everybody can actually have it. So it's about getting back to human impact stories to understand that we have a bunch of frat boys running the world with their tech, but who's being left behind? Who are they doing this for, right?
Yes. Professor, if you don't mind, I do want to mention like MTAs and Omnicars, like when you say like, what about people that don't have digital banks? I know that New York is moving away from like the MTA, like next year, like Metro cards, and they're switching over to Omnicards, and it made me think a lot about like seniors and like people who don't have access to like new day technology, because Omnicards are like a tap and you have to reload it with your like digital card.
Yes.
Like, that just kind of reminded me about like the human connection. Like, we're moving farther away from like the things that we know, and we're becoming more technology based. Yeah.
It's terrifying. That's a perfect example.
Yes.
Yeah, it reminds me also of the case when we were designing mobile phones, because I used to work at BlackBerry, and we had not considered the idea that the average elderly person could not see the size of the fonts, right? It's even about inclusion. It is about, sorry, it's not about accommodation. It is about inclusion and understanding that not everybody wants a digital life, right? We have a couple of big bros, out there in the world designing for a future where it is for them, without acknowledging not everybody. Some people are Luddites. Some people want nothing to do with technology, and that is why the GDPR in the UK, in Europe, specifically the country of Spain and to some extent Germany, have said our citizens want the right to be forgotten by digital systems. We need to advocate for that, right? The minute we are all in this digital milieu, in this swill, that is when we have the possibilities and the opening for digital eugenics, right? So we need to push back against that dystopian future that is the one thing, we'll all be these digital robots and whatever, cyborgs walking around. It's ridiculous. It's alienating to people's soul.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Lubin. I love talking to you. I learned a lot. If you don't mind if I just share like one example of that, like the dystopian future.
Yeah, come tell me. Yes.
I'm getting into makeup these days, and like I already am like a huge skincare fan. And I was reading this video essay yesterday about like how some makeup brands are just for the digital eye. Like they will promote clear skin just for the internet. So the clear skin only exists online for like your online persona, because like more people are gravitating toward like online identities and like moving away from being in the real world, which is so dystopian. And yeah, that just reminded me of that. Like they're catering toward, the online personas and like the glamification. That just made me think of that.
Wow. Okay, Nafi, you have to promise me that all of the conversations that we're having, you're going to harness them into writing or some vlogging, because
I promise.
Yes, you must do that, because these stories need to be told. Last week, the person I'm meeting after our call, she interviewed me for her podcast last Thursday, and the conversation was how AI has disrupted the beauty standards, right?
Yes.
And we talked briefly about the phenomenon of something called duck lips.
Never heard of that.
It was probably before your time, but it came in with the barrage, the Kardashian Jenner clan.
Oh yes, the lip filler.
Duck lip, right?
I know.
And its history as well too, and how AI beauty standards and filters have really recasted what it means to be beautiful.
Yeah.
The dangers of that. We're just also talking about how this should come with a warning label, because in Korea, I saw this video where they showed Korea before K-pop and plastic surgery, just people walking in the streets. And they had very interesting faces, and I could tell one person from the other. I'm like, yeah, I can immediately tell the phenotypical differences between
Mm-hmm.
people. Now I look
Mm-hmm.
at K-pop folks, and I'm like, they all look exactly the same.
Yes.
And there's a K-pop filter. People are having these crazy surgeries to look like a K-pop star, or what is the cartoon style from Japan? Manga?
Yeah, manga. If you don't mind me saying, I feel like that also ties in with like this desire of perfection, because I feel like that's like kind of the root of plastic surgery, like people altering their facial expressions so like they can look like, unreal. But it's like, what is real anymore? Are you a person anymore? Like what separates you from like a digitally created person? Because like, there are AI artists now. It's like, what's the
I gotta
difference
have you
between,
on my podcast.
yes,
I gotta
please.
have you on my
I would
YouTube.
love that. I would love that.
Yes, we must have this conversation,
Yeah.
because it is so refreshing to hear this from your young voice, because I think a lot of people have just given up, even my
Yeah.
students as well. I talk to them and it's like, there's a strong sense of apathy, and it is
Mm.
alienating to see so many of them who can never aspire to those beauty standards and what it does to them, what it
And
does.
it sells. That's the marketing, strategy. It's like, okay, you're not perfect, your skin is not perfect. Okay, you have to buy this. Now you have to buy that if you want clear skin, if you want to be accepted by society. It's like this whole thing that goes into women, making women hate themselves. I feel like there's a strong connection in that. Like
Yes,
that way to
absolutely.
make women insecure. I feel like we are a big part of like the marketing strategy. Like,
AI is a misogynist, okay?
yes,
Okay, you've got this. Your generation's got this. But a friend of
thank
mine
you.
has how old is she really? So she is 19. And just after COVID, her mom said to her, let's go out. We haven't really been out. And she said, well, I can't. Like, these people are going to be here and they're going to see like my face from other angles.
Oh my
And because she
God.
spent so much time, just like this, right? And, she'd gained some weight, and she was
Mm,
just really anxious about going out because nobody had ever seen her like this or like
mm,
this. And I was just like, what? This is crazy. So there are people who, especially a lot of people from the influencer class back in whenever, right? I think there's still some influencers left, but you've never seen them below here. So they have a lot of
yes.
anxiety over anything that is but this.
Yes.
Mhm.
Appearance, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's becoming a big part of our world and making it more dystopian. Like, I mean, forever, like in time, like people always say like appearance matters and stuff, but like it's getting to like an unhealthy point. It's like everybody's getting the same plastic surgery, like they're all becoming clones of each other. And I
Yes.
don't know, it's like, can I differentiate you now from like something that someone could create on the internet? It's like, what is a
Yes.
real person anymore? Like what is wrong with, embracing what makes us human? That's what separates us from AI. And it's like we're getting away from that. We're turning ourselves into users, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We're feeding into the system,
We're
right?
feeding into the system,
Yes.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, we must have this conversation,
We
because that is a conversation I've been planning to have.
yes,
Um,
I would
but
love to.
but not with somebody of my generation. I'm a Gen
Yes,
X, and
yes.
so I don't want to be like, okay, boomer, like, but
Yeah.
foundationally there's something wrong, and it is so refreshing to hear this from your
Yes,
voice, your
yes.
young voice. Yes.
Thank you.
Give me
Okay.
hope.
Thank you. And I also love talking to you because I know we are from different generations, but we both kind of like are now in this era of AI. And it's like, I know
Yes,
you grew up mostly without it, but it's like it's emerging into my generation and our perspectives are interesting. Like, okay, I
very
have,
interesting.
okay, I have one more question for you.
Yes.
This is, wait, no, I have two more questions. Okay. Let me see. Okay. I think we kind of talked about this, but what are some ways in your opinion to preserve like data governance and like let people have more control over their privacy and how like data is distributed? Because I know like with cell phones and stuff, like it's kind of inevitable. Like they make you use a face ID or they make you like use a password and stuff. It's like you can't escape it.
Yes, yes. So a short answer from my Luddite friends is to abstain, right? Just don't partake. But where does that leave you in society? You apply for a job. Like my son went to apply for a couple of, he's 15, and it's like, you need to do this online, right? So there's this pressure to do everything through this portal that we are now building server farms to house this data that is warming the planet. And it's absolutely crazy. So yes, so what is the best way to deal with that? If we are bound to be digital creatures, we need to figure out a way to work towards some degree of decentralization of data where the people whose data are being generated own that data, right? And I
Yeah.
wrote about this a while back. There's a company called, oh, the name escapes me now, but when I remember it, I'll send it to you. But there were two CEOs who started with totally different ideas about data. And one CEO thought that data should be centralized. We're going to hold all the data. We hold the power. The other decided that the name is coming to me and it just fleeted again. The data should be decentralized using a technology like blockchain. So imagine that I have my data key, whether it's a number, a digital something, and I am sick. I'm an American citizen. I use my data, plug it into the bulk of the healthcare data systems so my doctor can make a decision about me. When he's done, I plug it out. Now, I go
Wow.
to Germany. Yes, I go to Germany and I have all of the information about me on a stick. I plug it in. You see my banking data. I plug it out, and this data stays with me. It is a function of me as a human being whose data it is. I go to another country, the UK. I need my healthcare data for the other doctor that I need to see because I broke my leg. I plug it into their system and I plug it out. It comes with me. And so the whole idea of a portable, decentralized data system, my passport, everything is on here. That is, I
Social
think,
security number. Yeah.
everything. And the system is it's already there, right? It's just the fact that I now own it. So I think ideally that is the long-term idea and ideology of a system where the system is not looking at us to make money on us, but that would be the utopia to some extent. But by the same token, we need to be considerate of the fact that data being housed needs more server farms. It's warming up the planet. Like what happened with Mount Everest, right? The planet is getting warmer,
Yeah.
right? Yes. So that would be ideal, but my ideal would be to allow people non-technical options of existing in a world. I think that is why you're seeing a lot of people fleeing to places like Africa and the Caribbean because you can exist without technology in these places. It's like, as if all of our data has been charted by, the capitalists and the tech bros, and we're just like serfs walking around, trying to figure out what next. And they've also usurped so many of our specializations.
Mm.
Whether you were a technical writer, you can't do that anymore because you can just go to ChatGPT. And there's so many things where the essence of humanity has been extracted to the degree that should give us great pause and concern.
Thank you for that answer. That was beautiful.
Whoa.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of this ties back to like the idea of users, like being a user. I think that's like
Yeah.
a big central thing I got from our conversation so far. Yeah. And my last question for you today is what do you think our generation risk losing if we rely too much on AI to express ourselves? Like besides like human to human connection, which by the way, if you don't mind me sharing, there is a new AI like pendulum necklace. It's called friend.com. And basically it travels with you everywhere. And like I see ads of it on the subway and it's like, I won't ditch you on a date or like I won't leave dishes in the sink. And it's like you are an AI model. Like human to human connection is so important. Why are we connecting with the necklace? It's like getting so dystopian. I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts on that. I know it's crazy.
Woo! I'm so bothered. We don't have that in Canada. We do have certain different laws here that would not make such a thing possible in a subway space. But the Americans have always had this idea of free markets, whatever. But my friend Ren, who interviewed me, she's an industrial designer, and she designs wearables. And one, I think, what the wearables she designs are mostly for women, But can you imagine you have this thing around you collecting every piece of data about you? What I can say as a short answer is you've seen the movie Eve, how that ended.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So with that as a kind of a foundational answer is that this will not end well for humanity. This will not end well for humanity. If we look at what's happening in Japan right now, when I was growing up in the 80s, we looked at Japan as, wow, they've done all these great technological things. You could buy gasoline and just do like a drive-by, and it just knows who you are because you're wearing these objects, right? Bluetooth communication, near-field communication. What is happening in Japan right now? Never before have they had such stagnant population growth because people are not getting married. More than half of the men in Japan have never had sex. You know, they've lived in their own spaces. Now they are going through the process of reifying certain things to commoditize it. For example, you can buy an auntie, you could buy a grandma, you could buy
Yes,
an uncle, rent a boyfriend, well, the big one now is rent a grandmother because if
wow.
you've never had a grandmother, right? You want to know
Yeah,
what that feels like. So the sad irony of it is that the things that technology is enabling us to be alien from, the things now that we crave as human beings, is that sense of community, of society, of friends, of touching, of hugging. You know, like one of the things that I remember when the whole idea of virtual hugs was a thing as an emoji, as a chat,
yes,
like, why would I want a virtual hug? Like,
right. I
that's
want a real
crazy,
hug.
right? A real hug. And so we need to be mindful of all of the things that we already have as human beings where it has been reified, i.e., given a value to say, okay, now like friendship and so many things, like friendship is now Facebook. I remember the first time I typed, is he a friend or friend, right? That was a big thing for me to say that this person is not a friend,
Yeah,
but they're a friend from my digital life, right? So yeah, we need to be, this is not going to end well for humanity.
yeah. If you don't mind me adding on,
Yeah, go ahead.
with the friend thing. So I am like I use Twitter frequently, and a lot of people on Twitter like mostly like have friends on Twitter. Like the friend thing is a norm. And they use the letters IRL to express like in real life person. And like I've noticed like since quarantine happened, like IRL is the more like different thing. Like having a friend in person is not the norm. Like online friends are the norm. So the fact that they have to like specify IRL is crazy to me because it's like that's a person, but it's like your online friend is just a norm. Like I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but it's
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, I
yeah,
remember that as well too. But I guess the friend was the grandmother of the IRL thing, right?
exactly.
Um, I will never forget when I was working in New Jersey in Princeton for 5 years. It was around the time, it was the early 2000s, and I had gone for the interview, and I was being interviewed by 13 people, and there was a lunch break, and this lady said to me, "I Googled you." And that was considered creepy back in the day, right?
Wow.
She's like, "Oh, I Googled you." And it was just like, what a creep. You Googled me? Like, I'm here, right?
Talk
And
to
now
me.
when people say, "Oh, I Googled you," it's more like a compliment of, "I Googled you to see, what you've done." Da, da, da. It's still creepy to me.
Me too. It's creepy.
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lubin, for reading with me today. I've learned a
Yes.
lot. I always do. Like I think
Likewise, likewise. You give me such
yes,
hope.
yes.
You give me
Thank
such
you.
hope.
Yes, and I'm still reading the book. I'll let you know, like I'll give you updates like as I read through, but it's great. You're great. Thank you so much.
Or as your generation does these days. Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Let's talk again soon, and I will send a
Okay.
video.
Okay, thank you. Bye
Yes.
bye.
Bye.